Colleagues, welcome again to the third in a series of four discussions that we're having on practice transitions from a doctor's perspective. For those of you who haven't, if this is your first time in the series, I'd like to again welcome our guest speaker, the CEO of the Williams Group, Dr. Gillen Cockrell. Dr. Cockrell, as many of you know from his involvement in the AOA and his state association, had a very large and multi-doctor, multi-location, extremely profitable and extremely successful practice out here in the Midwest. Dr. Cockrell, 6 or 7 years ago, engineered the sale of that practice. And so we thought it would be really interesting to hear from him, both as a practitioner and one who has sat on both sides of the table, both in the buying of practices, but also more importantly, rolling up all of his locations and selling those off. So he has an interesting perspective and can share with you some thoughts because he too has done what you're thinking about and contemplating doing. So Dr. Cockrell, thank you. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today and share your thoughts.
I really enjoy being here, Bill. And in this session, as you know, we're going to talk a little bit about what's next. And because of my background as a geologist, I many times think about sticky situations as the saber-toothed tiger with his one foot in the La Brea tar pits, and it's all over. And so in this segment, I think about what's next and the slippery slope of the employment contract. Because as you know, in the peer-to-peer transactions, many times those are turnkey. The practice may just not be large enough to support 2 doctors or the selling doctor staying in the practice very long, and so it's relatively turnkey, and employment's not much of a situation. In a private equity deal, the employment is a big deal because it's relatively rare that the selling doctor is going to leave at the time that the sale closes, because they created a lot of value in the practice, and these large institutional buyers understand that a lot of the value of an optometry practice is tied to whoever built that practice and sustained that practice, and so maintaining that continuity is critical for them. And so so while you're getting caught up in the blush of the check that you received, don't forget about what you wanted life to be like after you get the check, and that's a highly negotiable situation. And the thing that you can overlook is you spent 30-40 years basically doing what you wanted to do, because that's why you became an optometrist, is so that you had some independent control over your life. You're making a quick shift into a corporate structure where continuity of operation is a key factor of their success. And so it's not a negative against anyone. It's just a requirement of a large flung corporate structure that we kind of have to do things pretty much the same. And those may not synchronize with the way you've done things for the last 30 or 40 years. So making sure that you understand what that means, and so that you can make the decision right up front when you're thinking about selling your practice, or the do I stay or do I go? And the beauty of this, and one of the things that has made a lot of this possible, is that many optometrists enjoy their work. So they're not itching to walk out the door anyway. So when somebody tells them, you know, we'd like you to stay 3 years, 5 years, most of them would like you to stay 5 years, that's initially, oh, great, I didn't want to quit anyway. I just wanted to get rid of some of the demand here on me from the management side. So 5 years, walk in the park, I love to go down there. Well, you love to go down there until somebody else told you how you were going to go down there and what you were going to do. And so just be prepared. And for me, this is one of the key areas of representation, and having somebody who's been down that road a number of times. And one of my very good friends in optometry and a long-term former client of Williams Group, made a decision to represent himself in one of these deals. And it was all great until two things. We mentioned in the last session the earnout. He didn't pay enough attention to the earnout, and what he really didn't pay attention to was the employment contract. And when I caught up with him literally 3 years later and said, hey, how'd things go? It's been the 3 most stressful years of my life. Well, I thought you were doing this to get rid of stress. Well, I was, but it didn't work out. So the money's nice. A lot of things are nice, but don't get yourself trapped into a situation where you just amped up the stress for the last 3 to 5 years of your practice, because it doesn't have to happen that way. I recall an optometrist that my partner and I bought out when he was about 62 or 3 years old, and when we purchased his practice, he said, I really want to work about 3 more years. We said great, because we liked him anyway. And
we'd like you to stay too.
Yeah, but what we did do was we took all the management stress away from him, and when we went into, we all had the same accountant, personal accountants, and when I went in to see my personal accountant a year or year and a half after we purchased this doctor's practice, I said to my accountant, the doctor we bought out, he seems to be getting younger while we're working with us. And he said, well, yeah, you guys took all the stress off of him. And
right.
So when you sell your practice, make sure you're going to get younger that next 3 or 5 years, not older that next 3 or 5 years, because you made a mistake in your contract, or you didn't have good representation, and you signed an agreement that's going to make you miserable for the next 5 years. And so one of the things I've been happy with in my career is that one, we bought that doctor's practice and we made him younger the last 3 years of his practice. And I think he was real happy about the way things worked out, and we were happy about it because it allowed us to bring another associate in and absorb his patients, and it worked out pretty well for everybody. And when I look back over my career, I've been real happy about that. But looking forward and being involved in some of these transactions, I've seen some doctors spend that last 3 to 5 years in extreme misery. And I think, Bill, didn't we have a client that he bought himself out of his contract and started a new practice over again because he was so unhappy?
Absolutely. I had a client on the East Coast, and he called me up one day and said, hey, I've got a gentleman who wants to buy my practice. And so we chatted a little bit, and I made, of course, the assumption that he was a young doctor, probably in his early 30s, and as it turned out, he was 57. So I said to our client, are you concerned of this gentleman's age? And he said no, because he had sold his practice to private equity and was miserable and got out of his contract, and he's going to take the money, and he wants to buy a private practice and practice another 10 years. Exactly. Dr. Cockrell, what other things do you think, what other things besides going from a self-employed, not having a boss to having a boss, what other 2 or 3 things you think are important that our colleagues should be thinking about as they go down this road that are important to an employment contract?
I think how are you getting paid, and is that a percentage? Is it bonuses? Are there penalties for not meeting performance, or that earnout? And so, did you set yourself up to fail, or did you set yourself up to win? And that's all in that early preparation phase. And then how long? Because a lot of optometrists wait way too long. And I understand, because when you're 5, 6, 10 years away from thinking about retiring, the last thing you're thinking about is retiring. You feel great. Yeah. You love going in and see your patients. You probably like your staff. The thought of doing something else doesn't really occur to you until you wake up one morning and think, wow, I don't think I can go down there again. And then it's too late. And so that timing is critical, because how long? You asked me about one of the things about the contract is how long. And if you can agree to a 5-year contract, I frankly agree. I believe you're going to sell your practice for more money. If you're going to negotiate a shorter term employment contract, it's going to be a dogfight. and to realize the value of your practice. So that's one of the things I think is critical. And then as happened with that client of yours, Bill, are there penalties for leaving early, or
Yes.
what's the pen? And then and what's the penalty? What if I don't ever make my earn out? What's the penalty for that? Is it all or nothing, or is it prorated?
Yes. Good point. Absolutely. How about covenants not to compete? Do you see that in the employment contracts with the selling doctor?
Well, certainly you do. Early in this process, I think we saw a number of contracts with no non-compete, but that's certainly an evolving landscape as well.
Yes. And it also seems over the many deals we've been involved in that the more rural a community, probably the less negotiation there is on the length of time of the contract. So if you're in rural North Dakota, you may have to stay 5 years to allow the private equity company sufficient time to be able to find and recruit your replacement, as opposed to if you're in metropolitan Los Angeles with 2 optometry schools and thousands of young optometrists replacing me, maybe I can negotiate a 2 or 3 year employment deal. Do you find that to be true? That in rural communities, the length of service is probably a little longer than in a large metro area?
Your ability to acquiesce to the length of service is going to definitely impact the value of your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems most of the deals are structured around some kind of a performance incentive. Whether it's, I saw one the other day where there was a flat nominal salary against 15% of the doctor's collections, paid on a monthly basis. And it seems that most of the contracts are structured around some kind of a performance incentive.
Oh yes, and I actually think that's really pretty fair.
Yes.
You still have you have to control of your own destiny, and then also one of this it seems like I'm sorry bringing up a lot of potential negative aspects of doing these kind of deals, but there's also some extremely pro portions of maybe selling your practice to a larger entity like a private equity group. And I know we're going to discuss one of those in the next session when it comes to real estate. But just one, realizing the value is a real big deal. Reducing management stress can be a real big deal. I think you have to have your head in the sand to not see that human resource knowledge, or the knowledge of human resource law, is a really
huge component
deal in any.
Yes.
It's a huge component in any business in America now, and I don't personally know a single optometrist with a degree in human resources. And even if they did have one, that landscape changes, dramatically. I think we work with a law firm out in California that I swear to goodness, he sends me an update at least 3 times a month on some new change in human resource law.
Yep. Labor law.
Labor law. And so there's just a tremendous number of, I guess, moving parts that were always there, but didn't, I guess, influence the outcome of your practice life the way they could now.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one thing that you also touched on that occasionally, not always, but occasionally, being an employee of a much larger organization sometimes is a big step up for the selling doctor in terms of benefits, because now suddenly I have paid vacation, suddenly I have health insurance, I have dental insurance, I have a 401k as part of my package. And perhaps in some practices a doctor, just because of the cost of that overhead, wasn't able to afford that for his staff. So there's a tremendous benefit to the staff often, because there can be a step up in benefits, and quite frankly, sometimes for the doctor there's a step up in benefits. So that employed arrangement is sometimes a really good outcome for the doctor.
Well, one of the great things about optometrists in general is they care about people, and a lot of them care deeply about their staff. And
Yes.
sometimes their staff has a lot more opportunities to move up through management positions in a larger organizations because there are multiple management positions available. Maybe they want to be a regional,
that's a good point.
A regional manager or a regional director. But in your practice, in your hometown, you only have one office, and that's it.
And one position, and that's it.
Yep, one position, one opportunity, and that's just the reality. But once you're part of a larger consortium of practices, then it's just another way for the cream to rise to the top. And,
absolutely.
And people who are motivated to learn and move up through a management team have that opportunity that maybe you couldn't provide. Not because you didn't want to, but just because that's just the reality of an individual optometry practice.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Cockrell, again, thank you very much for joining us. Those were very insightful and helpful, and really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to share some thoughts on that all-important employment contract. Thanks very much.
So always a pleasure, Bill.